Alright, so I'm back again, and I have another camera review, but this time instead of having some cool cameras laid out, I've got a dirty old camera bag, but it's what's inside that counts. So let's get to it and open it up and show you what's inside. So, I have... Oh, it's upside down. I have a Mamiya 7, one of the great cameras. This is a very popular camera. It was produced in the late 1980s, I think. They were very popular in the 90s. And this is a medium format 6x7 camera. And I've been thinking about doing this review for a while, and to be honest, it had me kind of stumped because I really didn't know where to go with this review, because obviously people kind of want to watch these reviews. They want a 10-minute review that tells you, this camera's awesome, it's great, buy it, here's some cool photos, you'll be a great photographer, use this camera. But that's almost exactly the opposite of what this camera is. I'll elaborate a little bit more in a minute, but I'll tell you first. I got this camera off Craigslist from an old guy. I got the whole kit. I got this camera bag. I got the camera, I got the 43mm lens, I have the viewfinder in here, I'll pull out in a minute, and it originally came with an 80mm lens, but it had terrible hazing, and it was pretty much unusable. I tried to kind of fix it up, and I broke it because the lens quality, it was very poorly built and very hard to work with, and it literally just cracked and fell apart, and it was unbelievable how poor the build quality was and how much haze had accumulated in it. I did get that lens for free. I pointed out all the haze to the guy, and he gave it to me for free. So I paid him a pretty reasonable price, basically, for this camera, this lens, again, the viewfinder in here, which is pretty expensive in itself, this crappy old camera bag. I had a bunch of filters that came with it I still have laying around. There was a cable release that came with it. It was a pretty nice kit all in all, with the exception of that bum 80mm lens. I went on eBay and I bought this 65mm lens for a pretty reasonable price. Not cheap by any stretch of imagination, but a pretty reasonable price. And I've used this a fair amount. I'll start by saying this is a medium format camera. It shoots 120 film, or it will shoot 220 film. Technically, you can shoot 35mm film in here, but you need this adapter that's kind of rare and expensive, so I don't have that. Wouldn't mind having it, but I don't have it. And I've put a few rolls of film through this. I've put some, basically everything I've put through here has been Kodak film. I've put some black and white Kodak Tri-X. I've put some Portra 160, some Portra 800, and a couple of rolls of Ektar 100. And from there, it's tough because I'd like to say that they're the best film. They're some of the best shots I've ever gotten on film. But to be honest, they're not mind-blowing. They're better than 35mm without a doubt. But compared to a lot of the modern-day digital cameras, like a Sony A7, I have the original Sony A7 Mark I, the standard model, and I consistently get way better shots out of that camera than I do out of this one. And that's kind of where I've been stumped with this camera. I've thought about doing this review for a while, and I've kind of discussed it with myself. I don't really use any notes or anything when I do these reviews. I just turn on the camera and start ranting and rambling about these cameras, because I know a lot about them, and sometimes I feel like that's the best way to do it. I probably should use notes and have a little checklist and go over different points, but I don't do that because, it's YouTube. Nobody really cares that much. Again, it's a camera that's very interesting because, like I said before, if you want to pick up a film camera and go out and shoot some vintage style shots on a medium format film camera, this is not the camera for you. You're going to hate it. You're not really going to like the results. It's probably not going to be the most user-friendly camera. But if you know what you're doing, if you really know what you're doing, if you understand things like film reciprocity, and you understand pushing and pulling film, if you understand the circle of confusion, this is a great camera to use. But the thing is, in this day and age, I don't know if there's too many people who want to do that. I know this camera is very popular in art-type communities. I think it's used some in certain types of high-end fashion photography and things like that. And it serves its purpose very well, but these cameras are expensive. The camera body itself, the standard Mamiya 7, will usually cost you $1,000 or more. The Mamiya 7 Mark II, which has a couple of minor upgrades, like the film, there's a little dark slide type thing in here. It has an easier to use knob, and I think it has a double exposure feature or something I don't know why you'd want to do that on a high-end camera like this, but apparently some people do. It's a lot more. That Mamiya 7 Mark II costs closer to $2,000. There is the 6, which shoots a 6x6 format, and that's one thing. So that this shoots a 6x7 format, so it's 6 centimeters tall, 7 centimeters wide. You only get 10 shots on a roll of film with this camera, which I think is one of my big sticking points, because you don't get great film economy out of it. 120 film is not particularly cheap, and like I said, I've shot a lot of Portra and Ektar on here, which are not cheap films. So I have been a bit disappointed with some of the results. And as I say that, Obviously, before I did this review, I kind of went through my library and I looked at some of the photos I'd taken in the past, and I was kind of organizing some, which I'll toss into the video at some point as examples. And a lot of the shots really are good shots, but I think I've been disappointed because the overall cost of shooting the film and developing it and then only being able to get 10 shots per roll, and every once in a while a shot being bad because I forgot and left the lens cap on, or because I just didn't get it in proper focus, it's really disheartening to see that like you've got 10 shots on a roll of film and one of them is ruined because of some dumb thing like that. But again, I think it kind of goes back to my point that this is a camera for a professional. This is a camera for an artist, or perhaps more appropriately an auteur, someone who really knows what they're doing and shows up. This is not the camera for somebody who just wants to go out and snap a couple of photos. This is the camera for somebody who knows exactly what they want to shoot. They know what lens they're going to use. They know what kind of film they're going to use. They know how they're going to develop it. They know all that before they go out and shoot. And then they go out and shoot a scene that they're looking for, or a scene that they've set up. This is a great camera for that. But if you're not doing that, I don't really think this is the camera for you. Because again, you're shooting medium format film. 10 shots to a roll. It's not cheap. You've got some interesting lenses. You've got, I think the lens lineup is kind of limited for this camera, but it's not bad. You have this 43 super wide angle lens, which is an f4.5. There's a 50mm f4.5 that's kind of similar to this, but it doesn't seem to be as popular. 65mm f4, you got the 80mm f4, and then you have a 150mm that I think is an f5.6. So your lens lineup is kind of limited. But at the same time, it's probably enough. You've got some good wide-angle options. And I will say, strangely enough, I've shot a few shots with the, a few rolls, with the 65mm lens and with the 43mm lens. And I kind of prefer the 43. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't really have any distortion, despite its incredibly wide angle. It's a very sharp lens. It just looks good. You do have some strange things. Let me see if I can take this lens off. You do have some unusual features on this camera. It has an external viewfinder for the wider angle lenses, and I believe that includes both the 43 and the 50, but both the 43 and the 50 have an external finder. And that's not totally unheard of, but it is a little bit out of the ordinary. I'm going to try to fit it on. Oh boy. Alright, so there it goes. You got a pretty interesting look with it on there. The camera becomes a little bit shorter and arguably a little bit easier to hold, but you have this big viewfinder on top. It does have some kind of like close focusing parallax correction. There's a little level bubble in there, and interestingly enough, there's sort of a mirror on the inside, so you can see the level bubble when you're looking through this viewfinder, which is very useful because if you're shooting landscapes, there's a good chance you'll shoot this camera on a tripod. And I just like it. I prefer the look of this lens to this one, and that's pretty much all I can say there. That's pure opinion, I know, but I do like it. I've debated with this camera. It was expensive. The whole setup was pretty expensive, and I bought it and I got the shots, and I wasn't blown away by them because, like I said, I shoot a fair amount of digital. I have a Sony A7, the original Mark I A7. I have the Zeiss 55 and I have the Zeiss 28. It's right here just to prove it, and also to give a bit of a size comparison. And I got to say that this 28mm lens is not amazing, but it works pretty darn well. The 55 is a really great lens, and I feel like I've gotten a lot of good shots off of it. I can put them in Photoshop and edit them very easily. The raw files off of this camera are amazing, and you can just a shadow highlight will bring so much life into an image. With this, though, you're kind of stuck with the scanned files you get that are usually TIFFs and okay, but not quite as editable. So I don't know, in a lot of ways I really do prefer the Sony A7 and its lenses. But a lot of that just comes down to modern convenience. This camera is pretty damn good. Like I said, it is quite a bit better than a 35mm camera. You get a lot more, the images are just sharper, they're more detailed. The lenses are good. They're not quite as good as I expected, especially the 65. I was thinking that was going to be an amazing lens, and it's good, but it's not quite what I was expecting. The 43 is actually better than I expected, and I think I'm going to kind of favor that from here on out. And as I was kind of hinting at before, I've considered selling this camera. So much so I actually contacted a couple of friends of mine who were kind of camera collectors and offered it to them, and they both were interested but didn't really have the money or the means to buy it right now, and I can't blame them. And I did, like I said, consider selling it, and I didn't really get any offers, so I decided to hold on to it for now. And I've looked at the images, tried to go over this review and kind of compared them and thought about them and gone back and kind of re-edited a few of them, and they're actually a little bit better than I was initially thinking. And I think with this camera, I'm thinking of picking up the 150mm lens and trying that out for a little bit, and just to see, because I would like to try a longer lens on this. I'd like to do some more like portrait type work with it, and I think the 150 would be great for that. I know some people online don't really love the 150, but I think I'm going to give it a shot because this camera is expensive. It's not particularly easy to use. It is not forgiving in its usage. It is a very unforgiving camera. But at the end of the day, it is a pretty good camera. I mean, if you're looking to shoot film, if you want to shoot artistic shots, if you want to shoot high-end film, this really is a good camera. But it comes with a cost. The camera's expensive. The lenses are expensive. The film, you have terrible film economy. 10 shots per roll. That's just, come on, man. That's absurd. But again, if you know what you're shooting, if you go out looking for a specific shot, if you're willing to set up a shot, pose people, work with models, I think this is a very good camera to use. So I guess to sum up this video, I'm going to say this is a good camera, but it's not for everybody. And I would say in this day and age, it's not for most people, but there are people who will love this camera. And I can kind of see why. It's not perfect and it's not necessarily for me. I probably will part with it someday down the road, but I've used it and I've gone back and used it again, and I'm considering buying another lens for it, so obviously I have some affinity for it. I think at this point I'm going to stop the video because I could ramble on about this camera all day, but I think I've gone over most of the points and kind of given my opinion on it, and hopefully that will give somebody enough inspiration to either buy this camera if they were kind of on the fence, or perhaps even more so not buy it if they were kind of thinking about dabbling in film or just picking up a medium format camera to try out. This is a good camera. I'm not going to go into a whole big comparison compared to Hasselblads and Pentexes and other models of Mamiya and things like that. I will just say that if you're looking to pick up a medium format camera and you're used to using a standard SLR style camera or more modern mirrorless camera, this is a very easy to use, approachable camera compared to those other brands and models. But again, it's not necessarily for everybody. It's not an easy-to-use camera. It's not a forgiving camera. But if you know what you're doing, it is a pretty damn good camera. So with that, I think I'm just going to call this video quits, and I'll post some photos to kind of show you what it looks like.